Hey, Daryl Dimer, welcome to the stream. Hey, Cobweb Caverns, welcome to the stream and evening right back at you. And hey, Laura, is the audio okay? Sounds good. What's up with everyone today? Um, I released my unboxing video yesterday of my TDCharX Tembo Potensis. Hey, Oddball Aquatics, welcome to the stream. Um, They seem to be doing okay. I'm not sure. I may have lost some overnight. I checked the water temperature in the tank. It got pretty cold here last night. Hey, Joel, welcome to the stream. And I may have lost a few overnight. They may have gotten caught in the wave maker, or potentially the weir overflow weir may have gotten some of them. Cobweb Cavern says was a good watch, Dwayne. Nice of them to make sure the customer was looked after properly. Yeah, I felt really encouraged by it. I really did. I was really happy that Michael went that extra mile to make up for what happened to us in the shipping. And I'm sure that's not something they'll do every time, but our case was pretty extreme, and I think they went the extra mile to make up for it, and I'm really happy that they did. So I I tried. Hey, Corona Ken, welcome to the stream, man. I tried to count this morning, and I only could count 8 of them, and that's 6 short of what I kind of counted yesterday. But I noticed that some of them were really low in the back of the tank. The way I've got this rack and this tank set up is kind of in a corner, and it's kind of hard to see in the back corner. I've only got one light on the tank, a floodlight that hangs down on one end of the tank, so it's kind of dark back in the corner, and it's hard to see because there's no real direct looking into it. So I'm just going to have to kind of watch and see. I tried to check my sump. I found one in the sump that was dead. I'm not sure whether it's a dead one that came out of the bag dead. When I put them in the tank, I had one dead come out of one of the bags. Um, there was several dead in another bag with only one alive, but I did it in an unusual way for me. Normally, I will pour them through a net or float the bags until they get a temperature equivalent of what the water in the tank is, and then I will drop them through a net and put them in. And this time I decided only a small amount of water in each bag, and there was like 4 or 5 in each bag, and I decided that what I was going to do was immerse the bags in the tank. Um, I know the water had to be changed at in Virginia where Michael is, so I wasn't so worried about the water having a lot of pathogens in it. Um, and as far as quarantine went, I really didn't have anything set up to quarantine them with. So I decided I've yet to treat these fish from Peru for parasites. So I've really had no issues with them showing any signs of parasites. They have been treated with salt in Peru. That's how Michael does it. You bring the fish back, they go into the pans, and a tablespoon or more of salt goes into each pan, and you fill them with water, and it's probably a gallon of water in each pan, and you put the fish in that salty water, and it is pretty salty, and that's the way he treats them. And a lot of exterior parasites will slough off with that salt water, and it gives the fish a chance to breathe easier and perhaps expel some parasites. And it's pretty deadly to pathogens too. So that's his methodology for treating them, and I'm sure that these excuse me, I'm sure that these Titio Charax got treated the same way, and they were very young, so I felt like I was going to have decent success with just dunking the bags in and letting the live fish swim out of the bag into the tank, and that way any that were dead would stay in the bag, and I wouldn't be dealing with fighting them quite so much. And it worked well, except in one bag a dead one did get out. So I'm unsure as to how many survived the first night. They're dealing with these are topwater fish. They don't really go to the bottom of the tank very much. They'll go to maybe the top 2/3 of the tank, and they prefer swimming near the surface. So they had two areas that might have caused them issues. One is the wave maker that's in the tank, and it's about 2/3 of the way down one side of the tank on one end, and it pumps water pretty strenuously through the tank. But I wanted this for the plecos, and I wanted it to keep the detritus in the tank kicked up and moving so that it would have a chance to make it through the weir and out into the sump. And so far it's worked really well for me. But that's a potential killer for those young fish. If they fell asleep and drifted into that wave maker, then they would have probably suffered from that. And the other problem is the weir that is near the top of the surface of the water, and it may have drawn them in if they were sleeping and drifted into that area around that weir. They may have gotten pulled down the weir. I haven't pulled the weir or the downspout to the sump out yet. It's possible that there may be a couple of bodies in there if I did indeed lose fish. The first night with my nigricinctus in the tank, with all the fish in the tank, I thought they were all dead because I couldn't find any of them anywhere, and they were all back in the back corner of the tank. There's a pile of rocks back there, and they were all down behind one of those rocks, all ganged up together, and I guess they were staying out of the flow. So it's entirely possible that the fish have survived and that I didn't lose any, and that they're just not hanging out where they started out hanging out under the light. So I'm just going to have to feed the tank normally and see how many of them come out. My guesstimate count this morning was 8, but that doesn't mean that there weren't more of them somewhere. If there's only 8 surviving in there now, that means I lost about 6 overnight, and I hope that's not the case. I hope there's more in there, but I'll just have to see. Just going to have to check and see. The tank was probably not optimally set up for the blues in the sense of how much flow there is, but I think they'll do all right once they get accustomed to the situation. And if I'm down to 8 or 10, I've still got a breeding group possibly, so I think I'll be all right. I know they prefer to be in larger numbers. 20 is probably the best count for a fish like that. So because they're very social, they're very interactive with each other, and they do better shoaling. Hey Nisi, welcome to the stream. And Nisi says, hey, it's the birthday boy. I can't stay. I'm waiting for my daughter to get coffee before hitting the road again. Hit the like button for the birthday boy. Cobweb Caverns says, fingers crossed that you have at least a dozen left. Thank you for wishing me a happy birthday, Nisi. We're getting ready to go out to eat here in a little bit, so I may cut this stream a little bit short myself. I don't want to miss our appointed time to go eat. I got a 35 millimeter camera for my birthday. 35 millimeter lens for my birthday. It's a prime lens, and I'm really looking forward to getting a chance to use it. It's probably more a street photography, portrait kind of lens, but I think I will find places to use it in my lives, in my recorded streams, and thank you guys for wishing me happy birthday. I just feel like that a prime lens is something that I've been missing, and the 35 millimeter 1.8, while not that expensive of a lens, I got it for $130 used, but in minty condition, and I felt like that was a reasonable expenditure for a lens. I've tried to stay low on the expense of my lenses. We just don't have that much money to spend. So I feel like I found a decent lens. It's a DX lens, so obviously it's made for a crop sensor camera, and I have a 5300, which is a crop sensor camera. But it will give me a wider angle view. It will give me some close-ups. I just feel like that maybe I can get my whole 110-gallon tank in a picture. Nisi, you guys have a good day. I'm just trying to stretch out my camera abilities. I'm not much at editing yet. I still don't edit very well. I can cut things, but I'm just not as invested in the spit, shine, and polish of the editing side of things, in the sense of wanting my videos to be glitz and glamour and all the latest bells and whistles. I'm really happy at just being me and just the way I do things. I know that's probably a problem for some people, that I'm out of focus so much, and I leave stuff in that probably should be cut out on some of my videos, but what you see is what you get. That's pretty much me in a nutshell. So I'm just going to continue on the way I am and try to slowly get a little better at what I'm doing, and not worry so much about the latest bells and whistles and all of the and if that keeps my channel small and I don't have as many people following me, I'm okay with that. I'm not really in this for hey Valley Fish, welcome to the stream. I'm not really in this for glamour and fame and all of that. I'm more interested in helping people that are trying to get a handle on how to keep fish and how to go from barely keeping fish alive to helping fish thrive. I want to cover some uh, expert topics. I want to cover things that are upper level in fish keeping because that's where my interests are. Not that I'm an expert fish keeper by any means. I make mistakes all the time. Last live stream, I goofed up and offered breeding two electric blue Dempseys together for a breeding thing and was immediately corrected. And it's obvious that I've never tried to breed electric blue Dempseys. And I was immediately corrected. So you're going to get mistakes with me. You're going to get errors. You're going to get places where my passion overreaches my knowledge. But I'm dedicated to trying to offer a down-to-earth look at fish keeping and a hopefully kind of a homey kind of experience with how I deliver it. So, you know, what you see is what you get from me, and my interests are 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 not how famous I become or how important I am. Those are the very least of my interests. So bear that in mind when you watch me or watch my videos, that self-aggrandizement is not something that I'm really centered on or focused on in any way, shape, or form. That I'm just trying to provide as much information as I can in as concise a format as I can and in such a way as to try to help other people. I don't know that I am helping other people, but I'm trying. So that's my rant on me getting another lens for my camera for my birthday and what that means as far as my video output will be in the future. I hope that with the Justin Shepard, welcome to the stream, and he's asking, what do people think about using dry ice as a source of CO2? You got me in an area where I have no information that I can bring to the topic. I know there's plenty of other ways to create CO2 in a bottle, but the dry ice one is not something I've encountered, or if I did, it's not something that I held on to. Bob Kaler, welcome to the stream, man. I once again am bereft of real topics. I went through my little spiel already this morning about not counting as many Titiocharax this morning as I had yesterday. Cobweb Caverns had cribs spawn. That's the problem with cribs, is that once they start spawning, they rarely stop, and what to do with all the fry. Cribs are really interesting and fun fish to watch. I've had experience. Cobweb Cavern says dry ice is a silly, expensive way of using CO2 in an aquarium. I guess maybe if you had an access to dry ice that was free from some source where you worked or something like that, I guess it might be okay that way, but I would have to agree.
It'd be awfully hard to control the amount of carbon dioxide.
My wife in the background is saying that she thinks it would be hard to meter how much CO2 was going into the aquarium with dry ice as the source. But I will be perfectly honest with you. I have a brown thumb. I have rarely ever had much luck with plants. My wife is much more um, capable of talking about plants, and by me saying that I have very little experience with plants, I mean that because I don't work plants a lot in my aquariums, I've had no experience with CO2 in an aquarium because I've never really reached that far in that direction to try to make my own CO2 bottle to diffuse in an aquarium. I'm sitting looking for those. Justin says it's free, and I've been trying it. It's in a plant-only tank.
Oh well, that would probably be fine then.
Yeah. Cobweb says the absolute best way of making CO2 for an aquarium is to make home brew booze. The CO2 is a product of the yeast making the alcohol. Yeah, that's always been my experience with what little CO2 experience I have is that you can make a 2 liter bottle produce a lot of CO2 for a short length of time, several days. But like I said, this plants is not an area that I'm a great person to ask questions of. If you're getting the dry ice free and you can figure out a way to meter it, if it's a plant only aquarium, then you can probably just watch how the plants act to see if you're getting a decent amount of CO2 in the aquarium. Justin says he has a DUI, so he doesn't drink anymore. No home brew for him. Well, that doesn't mean that you can't use yeast as a producer for CO2. Doesn't necessarily have to be making booze. There are lots of places online where people list how you can create CO2 bottles that will create CO2 as opposed to buying it and just using the gas itself. The only thing I've ever really had luck growing is moss. And for some reason, I seem to do really well with moss. But I was going to say, when I was sitting looking at these Titiocharax this morning, trying to count them, I noticed how much noise I was hearing in the room. And it seems to me that I have always set up aquariums to have a lot of splashing in them, a lot of water air mixture. Something about how I do aquariums has always made me do a lot of air mixing with the water. I splash water, I shoot outputs against the sides of the tank, which splashes water everywhere, and you have to put a lid on it to keep the water in the tank, keep it from splashing out of the tank. I do a lot of things like with a spray bar where water is being shot into the surface of the water and it creates a high concentration of bubbles in the water around it. For some reason, that's always what I've done. That's always how I've handled my water in tanks. And it works well for fish. But I have read in Diana Wallstad's book and from the other people that I've studied about plants that you don't want a lot of air to water mixture in a plant aquarium because it strips a lot of the CO2 and a lot of the gases and minerals out of the water that I guess it precipitates the minerals out of the water column that plants are normally trying to use. So that may be one of the reasons why I have so much trouble with plants, is because invariably when I set an aquarium up, I always end up with a lot of water splashing in the way I set them up. And evidently for plants, you want the least amount of air to water exchange possible so that you're not losing all that CO2 that the plants can use, and you're not uh, precipitating minerals out of the water that the plants can use, which may explain why I've always had trouble growing plants or keeping them alive. And perhaps that explains why I can grow moss. I'm not sure about that, but it just seems, it just kind of occurred to me. I've got this 55 gallon that these Peru fish are in, set up with a weir that pulls water off the surface into a. I built a plastic pipe, PVC pipe drain for the weir to put in the weir to drain the water to the sump, and I just really wasn't happy with how it performed. And basically I've just got an intake pipe on the end of a piece of 3/4 inch hose, plastic hose, and it just comes up out of the weir and goes underneath to the sump that I have built. And so the water's coming out of the weir and it mixes with air as it's coming down that drain pipe. So you hear a gurgling sound inside the weir. You hear a gurgling sound inside that piece of plastic hose that is my drain down to my sump. It dumps out onto a stack of trays out of an old fluval filter that I have filled with lava rock. And I placed an old filter cover. Thanks, Candy. Thanks for stopping by. And thanks for the birthday wishes. It drops out of the pipe, or sprays out of the pipe into that tray from an old fluval filter. It's 3 trays stacked up. And I have that coming down into the sump in an old refrigerator drawer that is taller than the plastic bin. I got a 10-gallon plastic bin for my sump, and it's probably 30 inches long and maybe 8 inches high. And I set that refrigerator tray, which is probably 15 inches high, in on one end of that. And in that refrigerator tray, I have a stack of 3 baskets from a fluval filter with lava rock in them, all 3 of them. And my output from my weir dumps out into that, and I have a piece of filter pad on top of that so that any kind of junk that makes it out of the tank will hit on that filter pad first. And then also in that the refrigerator drawer, I drilled 3 holes on one side, the side that points towards the pump that pulls the water back out to the tank. And they're on 3 different levels, and they're not that much apart, maybe a 1/4 inch difference between all 3 holes height-wise, so that one is flowing heavy all the time. The second one flows most of the time, and if the drawer starts to fill up too much, then the third one will flow. So I've got water splashing in the weir, going down to the bottom of the weir, water splashing and by this I mean air to water mixture, in the pipe going down to the sump, then water splashing from the end of the pipe onto that filter pad on that stack of trays. Then the water goes through. I've got a gallon of zeolite in two different bags in that refrigerator drawer, and most people probably won't know what zeolite is. It's an old school thing that we used way back in the day. I bought a 5 gallon or a, yeah 5 gallon bag of it for like $5 back in the day, and zeolite absorbs ammonia out of the water, and it will also absorb some nitrates and nitrite, not much, but some. And you can treat zeolite with salt water, and it will release all of that stuff so you can recharge it. And back in the day when you were using under gravel filters, your under gravel filter would often come with a cap where the air connected that had either carbon black in it or zeolite white in it. And that's what zeolite was used for back in the day. It works well, but after a while it's basically just inert. It's no longer absorbing any of the ammonia out of the water, and basically it's like a media for the bacteria to colonize. So I've got 2 bags of that in there. That's about a gallon total, and then I have a foam air filter for like a air conditioner in there between the water coming in and the outlets on the side of that drawer. So I've got water splashing 1, 2, 3, 4 places in my little 15-gallon sump that I have set up. And then I've got some foam out of one of my old fluvials, and some biomedia in the actual 10-gallon plastic bin that is the base of so the water coming out of the refrigerator drawer holes where I drilled goes across that foam and across that biomedia, and then it's sucked into the pump that brings the water back up to the tank and goes through a splash bar. So that's 6 places where there is air water exchange splashing going on in just that little sump setup that I have. So it occurs to me that for some reason I've always felt like that a lot of splashing water is good for my fish tanks, and it's worked pretty well for me, except it obviously is not good for plants. Plants do not appreciate it one bit. But that's how my little sump is set up, and this is me making a sump out of the materials I had at hand and the 10-gallon plastic bin that I bought at Kmart's for $5 or something like that. And I have that little plastic bin sitting on its lid, turned upwards, and I really had very little problem with it, except when something goes wrong with my outlet in the weir, clogs up on either guppy grass or something, and I've had to pull it out, and then the water is still getting pumped, and I clean it and reset that weir, and all of a sudden there's a lot of extra water in the tank because the pump's been pumping it out, and I end up with overflow down in my sump sometimes. And also because of the piping method that I'm using, just being a straight hose, that I've just stuck underneath the part of that foam filter. There's a hole in it, and I stick the hose through that. That I end up with drips coming back down that hose where it curves, and sometimes it will drip on the floor. But I took a round lid off of a plastic dish and stuck it down between the drawer and the bin itself, and let that lid lean up against the bottom of the hose, and that way it's catching the drips that occasionally come back down that hose. So I've pretty much had good luck with it, except when I've done something to cause an issue with it, and then I have to fight it. And occasionally it's overflowed on me. But I'm just trying to state the point that for some reason throughout my experience with fish keeping, I've really leaned hard towards a heavy air to water exchange by creating a lot of disturbance on the surface, by spraying water down into the water that's in the tank, or spraying it against the glass on the opposite side so that it splashes up and down into the water. And in those cases, it creates a lot of air bubbles, tiny air bubbles in the water itself. And for some reason, that's always made me feel like I was getting a higher oxygen content into the water. Now, you get a lot of air exchange by putting a bubble wand in a tank, but I don't think it's quite the same as driving water against glass that splashes into the water below it. I think that you get a lot heavier. It's not really oxygenation because it's just air. You know, it's mixed with carbon dioxide and everything else that's in the air. But I think that you get a lot more water exchange that way.
We've got about 10 minutes, honey.
Yes, I know. Guys, I'm going to have to start wrapping this up. I'm going to be pulling up short this week because we've got a dinner to go to, a dinner that I want very much to go to. And if you've got any last minute questions or topics, you've basically let me just ramble on this whole hour about my setups of my tanks. And it's, I mean, everyone will have their own methodologies that they have picked up along the way and ways that they use to deal. There are a lot of different paths. Hey, the Fish Loft, welcome to the stream. There are a lot of different paths towards being an expert fish keeper, or towards being a fish keeper that can then let their fish thrive in their tanks, in their setups. There is no one method that everyone has to do to get to the point where your fish are thriving and capable of breeding and doing all the things that fish do normally. So don't let anybody tell you this is the only way that you can do this. Yes, there are going to be pluses and minuses towards all the ways that you have developed to keep your fish. And someone will probably, Jake says he'd love to get me some of those nice ferns. These are all pictures from Peru. This is basically the full load of pictures that, thanks Cobweb Caverns. This is basically the full load of pictures. I have a video called Pictures at an Exhibition where I play the Mussorgsky Pictures at an Exhibition concert and show these pictures. So if you want to spend more time looking at them or be able to stop and freeze frame them, you can go to that video. um, I use it as a background because so far I have yet to see a thumbnail pop up with the same image in it, and it gives us something to talk about sometimes. It's at some point I'll get tired of it and start using something else, but I'm still doing enough Peru fish stuff and interacting enough with Go Wild Peru where I still feel kind of in the Peru frame of mind, and it's was such a great experience for me that it's going to take a while before it wears out for me being a topic. All right, guys, I'm going to shut it down. A little short today, but like I said, I've got a dinner that I've got to go get gussied up to go to. And thank you for all the birthday wishes, and I hope listening to me ramble about my fish keeping has been helpful in some way to someone. I'm sorry I didn't have more information about CO2. It's not an area that I have that much experience in. All right, guys, I hope you have a good weekend and good luck with your fish keeping.